Hello and welcome. Assalamu alaikum to our April webinar. As you know, we at IZU, Istanbul Sabahat Inzam University, and SIGA, Center for Islam and Global Affairs, conduct a monthly seminar on relevant topics in the field of international relations relating to the Muslim world and beyond. Uh, this month, we have three very distinguished panelists. They're going to speak on the developments in Libya, an issue that has come to some pragmatic resolution about its democratic future. This is a very important topic and also an example of the consequences of the Arab Spring. Today we have uh, Dr. Abdullatif Ahmida, who is a founding chair of the Department of Political Science at the University of New England, Maine. He has expertise in political theory, comparative politics, and historical sociology. His scholarship is cross-cultural and focuses on power, agency, and anti-colonial resistance in North Africa, especially modern Libya. Could we mute all the participants because there's some cross? Yeah. Uh, Next we have Dr. Esam Omeish. Um, he is a Libyan American surgeon from the Washington D.C. area. He has helped establish and presided over over the many Libyan American organizations, including Libyan Emergency Task Force, Libyan Council of North America, American Libyan Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and most recently the Libyan American Alliance. He has been an advocate of democracy and the rule of law in Libya after the February 17th revolution. He's a graduate of Georgetown University with degrees in biology and political science, as well as the medical doctorate. Uh, he is listed among the top 10 most famous alumni of Georgetown University, and he is the former president of the MSA and the former president of the national president of the Muslim American Society. Uh, Next, we have Dr. Ahmed Uysal, who is a political sociologist interested in studying Arab affairs and Turkish-Arab relations. Dr. Uysal graduated from Middle East Technical University from the sociology department, and he received his doctorate degree from Southern Illinois University. Currently, he is teaching in Islam University's International Relations Department. Dr. Uysal has lived and researched in many universities abroad, including Egypt, where he was an AUC Research Fellow in 2010. And most recently, he has published a book on Turkey's image in Egypt before and after the revolution. Dr. Uysal is also a participant in many news platforms and academic research institutes in Turkey and across the Arab world. I want to welcome all of our distinguished participants from different parts of the world, and I want to welcome our live audience who are following us on Twitter, on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome, everybody. I want to first turn the floor to Dr. Ahmida. Uh, today's today's topic is about the Libyan future, especially in terms of the democratic future. Because of Dr. Ahmida's work in North Africa, I would invite him to make his comments. Every participant has 15 to 18 minutes to speak, and then we will go into question and answers. You can write your questions on Facebook or send them in via whatever platform you have access to. Those will be funneled through me to their respective speakers. Dr. Ahmida, the floor is yours. Your mic is muted.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much for inviting me, and assalamu alaikum jami'an. I would like to share with you some insights about my own observation about where we are now regarding the Libyan crisis and the very, very tough decade that the Libyan people have endured, and they have faced very, very unpredictable turn of event after a very courageous and promising uprising in February 17, 2011. And a decade that is still unfortunately led to major consequences for the daily life of many ordinary Libyans. I'm going to talk about three major points regarding the Libyan crisis. So I will not be redundant because, as you know, the Libyan crisis has plenty of conferences, plenty of workshops, plenty of publications that probably will take a long, long time to cover. So I hope that our workshop today, our seminar, will raise some new maybe way of thinking that's as important as the challenges that are facing the Libyan people today. And in my opinion, there are three important points that are worth thinking of. The first is every crisis has a history. What's the genealogy of the current crisis that we have today? What are the internal, regional, and international actors and factors that led us to this situation? The second is how should we think about it from the point of view of the ordinary Libyan people, of all stratas, all groups, all trends, and avoid the pitfalls of ideological entrenchment and seeing the crisis either from this perspective or the other perspective. And finally is to explore what would be maybe the lessons, what are what have we learned and moving forward from now as far as the Libyan crisis of transition and where we go from here to hopefully more peaceful coexistence and rebuilding of the country and rebuilding of the institutions that the Libyan people deserve. The first one, I think I would like to start by saying that the Libyan crisis did not land from the sky. Allah did not send us this crisis and from nowhere. There are certain regional and local and international actors who contributed to this mess and the suffering in Libya. And I'll identify just some important observation, what we know now. The first one is, it has to do with the nature of the uprising and the old regime that refused to really reach modus vivendi and leave the country or go into exile to allow some transition. That was unfortunate, but that's really the reality, is that the old regime fought until the end to feeling like it could crush its rivals as they did before for the last 30 or 40 years. The second important factor would be the naivete, and I would say some opportunism among the coalition. And I was part of this uprising, and I don't want to pretend that I'm outside of it in exile. And what to do after you get rid of the leadership? What kind of vision? What kind of alliances? What kind of coexistence? What kind of alternative that this coalition that led the uprising will do in the aftermath of that? And unfortunately, there was so much lack of thinking about it. Gaddafi is gone, Libya will become a Jannah, will be a paradise after that. And I think that's a major lesson, especially if we're talking about people who fight over the new system. after the regime was defeated, that was what do you want to do after that? That also should be combined with this major flaw in exercising self-criticism and review of what went wrong. The second one, of course, is the unfortunate consequences of the civil war, because segment of Libyan society fought with the regime, and that led to the militarization of the uprising. That was a disastrous outcome for the Libyan people. But also that will bring the third factor as far as the genealogy and the roots of the current crisis or the history of the present. Here, I would say that we need to recognize that regional actors, international actors had their own motives, their own agenda in fighting and trying to get rid of the regime, and including the NATO intervention and the use of international law in this. We need to revisit this. We need to rethink about it. And I'll cite one example that we know. The British Parliament had in 2016 a commission that reviewed the intervention and reached some really conclusion that need to be thought of and not dismissed quickly, which is that the intervention was miscalculated. It led to consequences and that are really violent and brutal. And there were also other motives behind it, including Prime Minister Cameron at that time. We know also that the regional actors, whether that Europeans or Arab actors or international actors hiding behind the NATO and the UN resolutions, they want to get rid of the regime for other motives. It has nothing to do with the Libyan choice to determine their own government, have a accountable democratic system that really consistent with their traditions, institutions, religion, and also culture. And I think that that naivete, that opportunism led to, despite the very, very democratic elections, allowed certain groups to fill in a vacuum. And that vacuum was military groups, militarization of the uprising, and also intervention and blocking any attempt to complete the process, which is rule of law, building the institutions, an open society, and choices for the Libyan people to determine what they have to do. In other words, the question that nobody answered is it really the goal is to destroy the institution inherited before, or really to correct the despotism and the dictatorships that became entrenched for a long time and became so dated and out of touch of the realities of the ordinary Libyans? These are hard questions, but they need to be asked now. And we cannot just say, this is an internal conflict. Unfortunately, Libya, it's not a cliche, became a stage for settling scores, trying to ensure strategic, economic, and also ideological wars because of the significance of the Libyan state, the richness of the Libyan society, the very significant location of Libya in general. So Libya became an arena for all of those regional and international actors. And unfortunately, we have to admit also they found local actors and allies. I argue that what happened in Libya, civil war, many civil wars here and there, but also internationalized war. In civil wars, there is no complete innocent actor. And unfortunately, the use of force, military, militias, mercenaries is done by many, many actors on the ground. And therefore, the Libyan public opinion, which voted many times in a very, very spectacular way, has been hijacked. And the resolution of this internationalized, regionalized conflict has also to shake up or remove this obstacle toward giving the right of the Libyan people to elect their own officials and also determine what kind of government, what kind of constitution, what kind of future they want to have. And unless these actors or these major movers and shakers, whether that's in terms of covert operation, by local actors, by arming certain groups or not, all of these actors, need to be kind of examined and not to settle a score or to get revenge. Otherwise, the cycle of violence and counter revenge and killing is going to continue. And I think in that sense, one has to see what happened recently. The failed military attack against Tripoli, the ceasefire, the vision for the military, economic, and also political tracks, which has been stalled for a long time, began to take some momentum. And the Congress of Berlin really led to some truce among the rivals in the Libyan conflict outside. And that also led to some truce internally, especially when the Sarraj and Aqila Saleh agreed to ceasefire, and they began to talk to each other. I think I'm not completely sold into that the move forward is going to be safe and I'll be optimistic. I hope so. I think if there's one lesson we learned from the last 10 years is we can't be overly optimistic, but at the same time, the fact that the guns are silent now, people are talking to each other, Libyan of different backgrounds and region and ideological persuasions and backgrounds. The fact that now the new government was approved, the military commission was ahead of everybody, where the military army is really calling for a unity and reassertion of the army. They are signs that allow us to be optimistic, but let's not kid ourselves. Maybe there's a light at the end, but we haven't reached at the end of the tunnel. There is now a process that might be very promising, and but
Dr. Ahmida, I apologize for being disrespectful, but if you could conclude in the next 3 minutes.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely.
Sorry,
in conclusion, I think the factors that contributed to the conflict are still there. There is, unless these factors have been confronted honestly and collectively without pointing fingers and thinking of the future, not only of the region, of Libyan choices, and a stable Libya would be good for everybody, not only for the Libyan people, but for the region and for the international, stability of the Mediterranean and Northern Africa in general. And I think this is possible, but it's not going to land to us from Allah. We have to also be diligent and make sure that we learn from the last decade that caused so much suffering, exploitation, and also displacement and agony that's not really resolved. And if we keep that in mind, then maybe the conversation will go beyond just incriminating others and rivals, but look at something that will unify at least the Libyan people for a future that might be promising.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmida. I want to move along with our comments so that we could have a very engaged question and answer session later. So my apologies for being discourteous to any of the speakers. It's just my job. Dr. Esam Omeish, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Dr. Al-Aryan and the Center for Islam and Global Affairs and the university for hosting this important event and engaging us in this discussion. I want to take us back into more of an assessment of the regional and international interventions that have affected Libya, as we discuss the topic here, examining regional and global implications for Libya, the quest for power. And I wanted to do that because I think it's important to reach conclusions based on the ability to assess this more accurately. I think if you look at Libya, Libya has several factors that made it a ready-made place for potential interventions, whether it's regional or whether it's international. Libya is the gateway for Africa, which is looked upon as a very promising continent, whether internationally as the next big, market with its population, whether it's natural resources, and whether it's, geopolitical situation in the world. Libya happens to be the practical gateway to that great big continent. Libya also represents the southern border for Europe and the Mediterranean, which is a very significant part of the world. And it's fraught with a lot of conflicts and problems. And so that makes it also a very important place and a potential area of contention. Libya has certain centralities in the hydrocarbon and energy sector. Libya is in the top 10 producers of oil in the world. Libya has the largest reserves of Africa, and Libya has 3% of the world's oil. That makes it another location for contention. Libya happens to be today is a very large space in a very important area that can be a hotbed for international terrorism and for routes for illegal migration that impacts not only Europe but the whole region. And ultimately, Libya represents a promise for many who want to be involved in terms of its rebuilding and in terms of the chances for people to get engaged in the infrastructure rebuilding of Libya and investments in all sectors, energy and minerals and otherwise. And so Libya, while it's a blessing to have all these resources, is also impacted by the fact that it's a sought after place because of these considerations I spoke about. So from the beginning, we see a lot of intervention, regional and international. And I think it's, again, as I said, it's important to map them out, in a strategic way that allows us to reach some conclusions as where we can see Libya moving forward so that it can benefit from that complexity or that web, as opposed to being the victim of proxy wars and the victim of internationals doing their thing and not paying attention to what Libya needs and what Libya itself should hold on to. So regionally, we can see a Libya that in the timing of an Arab Spring, in the aftermath of February 17th and all the other revolutions in the area, we see the rise of this dynamic of the revolutions for democracy countered by the counter revolutions that are reactionary, that are trying to preserve the old order. And that unfortunately not only created a reality that it impacts all of the countries of the Arab Spring, but in fact, it led to very direct intervention and very direct undermining of the stability of these countries. And we see that in Libya in three different groups regionally. The first is the counter-revolutionaries to the Arab Spring. And those are led by the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Egypt after the military coup of 2013. And we see Jordan as being a proxy to all this. And so that regional intervention has been very impactful in Libya. And the UAE has led the way to try to support a military takeover of Libya through its project with the warlord General Haftar. And so that dynamic plays itself out. Egypt has much more complex relationships. Egypt is a neighbor of Libya and shares a very long border. But in fact, it's also upon and unfortunately was mixed in the impact regionally on Libya by trying to support a military warlord who's undermining any democratic processes in Libya. And then, as I said, you see the other countries. The other block of countries that matter in the regional implications in Libya is the Maghreb group, Tunis, Algeria.
Dr. Esam, we have a problem with your mic. I think it got muted.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear.
Yeah, we're talking about the second block, which is the Maghreb block. And that block, exercise what they term positive neutrality. They're trying to help to see Libya move in the right direction, but they're not intervening necessarily in politics and as much as the proxy wars that have taken place. And then we see the regional intervention of the African bloc in general. I mean, Libya and Gaddafi more particularly has been very interested in Africa, and Libya has a lot of investments in Africa, and Africans, has had a strong engagement with Libya. And so their attempt through the African Union or to other countries that are either bordering Libya and others have been also part of that international mix. Unfortunately, some of that translated into these countries being sources for mercenaries, and we'll come to that later. Then we move on to, looking at this from an international lens. And that is even more complex, because when we look at the original intervention in Libya, it was NATO-led, and it was Western world-led practically, along with the UN partnership. And those countries have had, a mixed levels of intervention or engagement. As Dr. Ali mentioned, initially it was this naivete that came on thinking that state building was an easy process after the dismantling of the regime. So that proved to be much more difficult. The other thing was the US's position, while being the bulk of the NATO involvement, now they want to lead from behind and letting the Europeans engage Libya. And unfortunately, the Europeans' differences and their challenges of their internal politics has also led to a chaos in how the European sector has engaged Libya internationally. And then, of course, we see the countries like Russia, which has had long relationships with Libya in the past, has deep-seated interests in Libya, but also in its competition with NATO, and it's wanting to take hold in the warm waters of the Mediterranean and establish military presence that threatens the southern Europe. You see them getting intermixed and getting more engaged. So this international complexity has been also one of the things that have challenged Libya's progress towards stability. But it's a reality, and Libyans have to learn to understand how to engage this. Now, all of this is coalesced in the UN process, which has been very engaged in Libya. And the US's policy has been, for the most part, always supportive of the UN process, but also the US's engagement has went through its ebbs and flows, just mainly because of sometimes events that have taken place. The US was forthcoming initially, but then it decided to lead from behind. Then we had the unfortunate murder or the killing of the ambassador, which created a very heavy political aftermath in Washington, which led to some disengagement. But consistently, the US diplomacy has always been there, and it's proven to be central to being able to not only rein in the regional proxy powers, but also to bring in leadership and strong diplomacy that could unify the Europeans around a process and be able to be a strong counterbalance to the Russian influence and possibly the Chinese influence in the continent in general. Now, one part that is also more recent is the Turkish role, but I believe Professor Uysal is going to be speaking about that, and I don't want to speak much to it. But I want to go back to the fact that the weight of international diplomacy has coalesced around the UN process, despite some ineffective resolutions in terms of arms embargo and in terms of preventing interventions and the mercenaries in Libya. But nonetheless, we see that the real efforts that have been driving stability in Libya ultimately came through the UN's efforts to create a process. And we all saw that at the beginning of 2020, after the bloody civil war has started and after Haftar's attack on the capital, Tripoli, we see that internationals finally coming together after, an Italian effort, after French effort, after multiple other efforts. We see them coalescing in the Berlin process, which until today we still see as being the engine behind the UN processes, and in which the three tracks were identified: the political, the security, our military track, and the economic track. And those have been developing really since then. And countries have aligned around these different tracks, which eventually led to the birth of a Libyan agreement finally in the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum, led by the Deputy Envoy Stephanie Williams. I mean, Libya went through multiple envoys, from Ian Martin to Tariq Mitri to Benedito Leon to Koppler to Ghassan Salama, who eventually resigned in March of 2020. And then Stephanie Williams was able to deliver a stable, if you may, solution to the Libyan conflict through bringing on a national unity government. So we still see the play out of these political international interventions shaping up the future of Libya. And like I said, I think there's a big part that should be reserved to Turkey's involvement, which I think if not covered enough, I can come back to it. But here's my concluding comments on this. Because of the complexity of the regional and the international interventions in Libya, and because of the fact that they can be understood in the face of several geostrategic matters that we delineated at the beginning, it is not a choice for the Libyans to rise up from the ashes and be able to become a strong partner that can engage this complex web of relations that are intersecting and that are conflicting in many, many ways, and be able to align itself with the regional allies and the international allies that could deliver Libya towards the path of democracy and the rule of law, and by the same token be able to align with regional and international allies that can quell the negative impact and the spoiling effect that has been ongoing in Libya by the counter-revolutionary forces, by the reactionary forces, by the anti-Arab Spring forces, and by those who are only looking for short-term gains that are in conflict with international norms or international order. And by that, I mean, you know, we can't afford to have a continuous flow of arms and mercenaries in Libya. That has to be something that the internationals have to stand strong by and act upon. We can't have a conflict, a simmering conflict in the region by having Russia having military presence at the southern border of Europe, facing up to NATO and creating potentially an international conflict. We can't have countries that continuously support anti-democratic and military forces and not to be reined in by countries like the US that has strong diplomacy and has strong impact to be able to rein in the United Arab Emirates and Egypt and the Saudi Arabia of this world from supporting these forces. And I think at the same time, when we demand strong US,
please forgive me.
I'm closing up.
For interfering.
When we look at the US diplomacy, we need to fortify that US diplomacy by the forces that have affected regional stability, and namely Turkey. So we can't have a simmering US-Turkish conflict in the region, but rather we need to realign this, especially in light of the Eastern Mediterranean development. All that dictates that we need to have a Libyan partner that is strong, that is able to lay out Libya's interest, who is able to create strong partnerships regionally and internationally, and address Libya's from the Libyan angle and from the Libyan interest, along with a reconciliation between these forces that may afford economic prizes, may afford peace and stability to neighbors, but at the end of the day does not create the potential for future conflict in Libya. So with that, I would leave the rest of the discussion to the questions. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Dr. Esam. Dr. Ahmed, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Uwais. And Libya is lucky and unlucky at the same time. Is unlucky because it has oil and gas and reserves and other wealths that attract a lot of bugs, you know. But it is lucky in a way, at least better than Yemen, because nobody cares about Yemen because they don't have much oil and gas, and also maybe Syria. So Libya, after the toppling of Gaddafi regime, they had an opportunity and a challenge to reshape the system. It is generally sometimes better to rebuild from zero than to try to reform the corrupt system. And the Libyans, because Gaddafi did not have any working system and everything based on his personality and family, almost, and Libyans had a chance to start from zero, and they were doing very well until the coup plotters came to destroy it, because they had elections, parliamentary elections, presidential elections, and constitution, etc. And Haftar was the spoiler, and he actually tried 2 times to topple the military, to topple the democratic regime, democratic government. The initial one, and then after they agreed with this, Sarraj government or Accord government, which means they already agreed to on this government, but Haftar and its supporters, they choose the parts they like, and then they rebelled against. I mean, if anything, agreement. It should be like mutual, but they chose the parts they like, and they rebelled and disregard the other parts of the agreement. Anyway, but we need to give credit to the Libyan people, because they rebelled on the coup plotters, coup attempt, and they also give a big fight toward against the coup plotter. And when they were pushed too hard, because a lot of countries were supporting them, such as UAE, Israel, Egypt, France, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and it's no joke. Yeah, I mean, several countries that are trying to topple the legitimate government, and only Libyan people. Then Turkey intervened to help this legitimate government, and they succeeded in that. They pushed them from the west of the country. I mean, they were supposed to push them all the way. I mean, they should cancel, but time and I think international pressure, plus maybe some preparations prevented that, because Russia, those plotters, or the coup mentality, they preferred Russia over a legitimate Libyan government. So this is like the essence of the story. Even France and UAE, they preferred Russia over democratic Libya. This is the dilemma, and this is the irony of this the crisis. And we cannot. Of course, we want to end the conflict, and it's better the Libyans end the conflict and stop the bloodshed. But in the international discourse, even I also hear sometime in today's meeting, as if there are two sides are fighting, like one tribe against another one. No, this is not true. This is like one part is, trying to take the whole piece, whole cake, without any legitimate basis, and they want to take it on the tip of the gun. So we need to define the situation very well, and there is still a threat or danger, because these plotters did not go away, and they stole, even when they were the money sent to the eastern Libya. Haftar forces stole all this money. Now they want this money that he spent for arms to be refunded. So this is also another dilemma, that if you refund it, so he will dare again. And how to stop? I think the major challenge, how to stop him from attempting to take over again. I don't think he's stronger like before, but in Turkish we say, because we lived through several military coups and interventions, we say once a coup plotter is always a coup plotter. So military coup plotters that does not لا يفلحون, they don't get better. They don't recover from their mistakes. So and we know that this crisis affects especially Libya's neighbors, because Egypt has about 1 million people working in Libya. Tunisia, they say Tunisia has its own budget. Like every year when they calculate it, they calculate like regular income. They also calculate the income that comes from Libya. So it was so critical for Tunisia, its well-being and its trade and etc. And as our colleagues mentioned, its role in Africa. So everybody is concerned. This also gives an opportunity to push for a better solution. Turkey intervened when the legitimate forces get kind of trapped in between these many forces, and then they were successful. But military success, support is generally spelled out, but Turkey's diplomatic support for the Libyan cause, especially playing out the controversies, competition between France and Italy, also Russian presence did not please Americans in Libya, and also some maybe bothered some of the Europeans. So this give Libyans a chance to take, for example, America take a little bit positive stance on Libya, but I don't know how things will go with Biden. And they are supposed to be democratic, but we know Obama sold out the Arab Spring, Arab democracy, so we cannot exactly tell. And today, this new accord or new agreement, new reconciliation, I think is positive, and we should give a chance, and we should support it. But we should be very cautious that these plotters not to dare the same again, to rebel against. But Haftar is still there, and he should be tamed, and he should be pushed out of the equation. And he failed in his life, but he only pay attention. He considers only the arms, and he has no place in the political future of Libya. But I think now the positive part, both Turkey and Egypt, they took a more constructive style toward each other. We were constructive, of course, for Libya overall, but Egypt a little bit distance from Haftar, and they wanna give a chance for this. But Egypt also is under pressure from the UAE, France, and other countries, maybe America and Israel, and these also limits Egypt's hands. But Egypt also has a major problem with Ethiopia over the dam, and this complicates the issue. But I think if the West is generally sincere about democracy, rule of law, and human rights, etc., Libya, has a lot. All of the resources to rebound very quickly, to come back very strong, and doesn't need other support as much. But we need to give the Libyans a chance because they can decide for themselves. We know there is Jihawiyya, there is the territorial sensitivities between the East and West, and also the Fizan region, but this does not prevent them, or even tribal mentality, but this does not prevent them from reconciling, because they know they have resources and they can do better than this. And I don't know how much time I have.
You have a few more minutes if you'd like to continue, or you can conclude.
Yes, I just one concluding sentence. Libya for Libya's reconstruction and well-being to stand together, I think is very good. International community can help to heal the wounds of different sides, because of course when there is fighting, a lot of bloodshed and grudge also happens, and international community can mediate and tone down or heal these wounds with different mechanisms, reconciliation and conflict mediation and other mechanisms. Turkey is helping them to rebuild their army, their infrastructure, their municipal services. All, they need them dearly. They are lacking water, electricity, even some basic items, and Turkey will be by Libyan people. And Turkey does not distinguish between east of Libya or west of Libya or south of Libya. Libya is our, strategic depth is very important for Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean. When the two countries they signed the agreement, it benefits both of them, and there is a kind of a push or effort to push Turkey out of the Eastern Mediterranean, and Turkey is surrounded by three seas by seas from three sides. They want to exclude them from the west and from the south, and Turkey will not accept it. And Libya will benefit from these sharing from the middle, and even Egypt is gonna gain more from Turkey's logic in sharing Mediterranean waters and economic interest. So all these come together. I mean, Libya is also important to reach Africa, and also this will benefit Libya, and also rebuilding Libya is a priority for Turkey and its stability and its democracy, not only stability at the expense of democracy and basic rights of Libyan people. So there is hope, but with caution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmet, for your comments. There's been a lot of questions that have come in actually from our audience. So I'm glad that we have this time for a question and answer session. I'll ask a couple of questions, and then I will start picking up questions one by one from the list here that is before me. First, I want to begin with Dr. Ahmida. I know that you have to leave a little early, unfortunately, because you have to teach your class. So let me kind of couple all the questions that we got regarding your comments. Number one, I wanted you, because of your background, I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on the colonial background of Libyan division that we saw reemerge in this time period, meaning the historical roots of the conflict, especially in terms of the fact that we saw that, as Dr. Ahmed said, that we saw Haftar on one side and then the Tripoli government, but these divisions are not new. We saw these before the establishment of the Libyan regime, before Gaddafi. Is there any relationship between the distinction between the East and the West that we saw today, and also the foreign intervention with the East and the West that we saw today? I mean, very interestingly, Turkey, for instance, sided with the Tripoli government, but as you know, during World War I, Turkey was more active in the eastern side, and this time it's a little bit opposite. That's number one. So the historical background a little bit, if you could talk about that. Number two is, you mentioned that according to your assessment of civil wars and your research on civil wars, that there is no innocent actor. This contradicts what we just heard from Dr. Ahmed, in that Dr. Ahmed's analysis was that no, here we have the conflict has been ill-defined, and therefore we have on one side a democratic and legitimate government, and on the other side we have a coup plotter. Third question for you is about the Libyan votes that you mentioned. You mentioned that the Libyan people had conducted a number of votes. In those votes, what is your analysis of those elections in terms of which side has more legitimacy before the Libyan people? And a couple of more questions that you might want to briefly explain about. The internal nature of the conflict. So one of the ways that the conflict has been made exotic in the eyes of most of the observers is that it's too complicated. You know, there's tribes inside of Libya, and there's so many of them, and each one of them is rivaling another one. one of the, maybe Dr. Ahmed might agree here, one of the ways that we have misunderstood Libya is that we have fallen into the trap of um, not simplifying the issue enough, meaning that on one side we have democratic legitimate government, the other side we have an actor that is illegitimate. And we hear this a lot in the media, right? Tribes are in Libya. The last thing is, before you leave, if you could comment on the main lessons that have been learned over the last 10 years after the Libyan revolution. So I would like to, there's a lot of other questions as well, but I will, if you would like to stay for a second round, I mean, I got a lot of responses to your comments. Oh yeah, one other thing was, one last thing I should mention is that, okay. So though the US historically has always sought to democratize northern African states, the European policy diverges with the US policy. Therefore, the US is still leaving the Libyan file to Europeans. Actually, I think you could comment on this if you'd like, but I think because Dr. Omeish had mentioned this very specifically in his talk, he could also comment on that. Okay, go ahead, Dr.
Okay, this is plenty of questions. I'm glad that people are active and engaged. I'll do my best, and I really apologize to my colleagues and to you and to your viewers that I have to leave. Otherwise, I would love to stay longer and participate in this very vital conversation. Let me start with the last question. The reporting and the thinking, the scholarly and the media reporting of Libya usually filtered through references and models. And I hear that time and again, tribalism, fragmentation, regionalism, traditional society, rentier state. And I think I laugh at these because what it is, it re-emphasized the caricature, stereotypical image of Libya. People don't know much about the country for a long time. And what they do, they escape into really shallow, very, very Orientalist idea of tribalism. Because I get all these questions, how many tribes is the professor here? How many tribes there? And nobody really paused to think, is it really true? You're talking about a society now in the 21st century that 80% of it lives in cities, in actually 5 major cities, the majority of the Libyan people, and they are integrated in modern rentier world capitalist economy. So to talk about tribalism, unless it's really defined, it's really misleading. It's a cliche. And it really reflects either lack of knowledge or maybe ideological reproduction of the colonial and the Orientalist cliches about these societies, including Libya. So I'm very, very critical of that way of thinking. Second, fragmentation. There are books that are written about fragmentation and about the lack of even a Libyan society itself, or Libyan nationalism. We forget this is really a society that, experienced one of the worst colonial experience in Africa and lost between 1/3 to 1/2 of its population and fought a heroic anti-colonial resistance. And in the 1950s and 1960s, and one could even claim in the 70s with their military takeover, was a model in the region. And live at that time, people didn't say there is regionalism or there is a fragmentation or so. So the question is really fictitious to me. It doesn't really, hold water when you are rigorous and you compare the context of that period, of this period. Let's add another dimension. Here you're talking about collapse of the state. You're talking about armed groups and militias and mercenaries in all parts. I wouldn't say only the East, all parts. That's why I said nobody's innocent in this civil war. Second, if you have a country that has, at least according to the UN, 20 million piece of arms and weapons. I always tell my students, even in Switzerland, if you put 20 million pieces of weapons, it become really violent. And the idea that these are eternal, primordial factors in Libyan culture is really is very, very fallacious. Very, doesn't really have a real evidence for it. So that the assumption, we need to confront them. Now Libya is going through a conflict and post uprising conflict. It's not really unique. Many countries went through it. And we need to understand and historicize that factor. Now the question of regionalism and the question of Libya is a huge country. It's the largest, maybe the third largest country after the partition of Sudan in Africa. Now regionalism, it exists everywhere. Where I live in America, there are regionalism everywhere. This is not unique or something really odd. Turkey has regionalism. Egypt has regionalism. France has regionalism. Who doesn't? So the idea of having regional diversity is not really an odd or unique in that sense. And we need to keep that in mind. Now you have a full-fledged conflict, post-uprising, post-revolution conflict for a specific reason, not for ageless, essentialist factors. That's the one thing we have to keep in mind. Now, the colonial period is very important, but it's really not misunderstood. This is my area of research. I spent 30 years in the history of the colonial period in the whole Northern Africa. Tripoli Gharb was the last Ottoman regency in Africa. And in this case, Libyans and Ottomans fought together, including the founder of modern Turkey, Kemal Atatürk. They fought in the east, which was led by the Sanusi social order, and it was a heroic, pan-Islamic resistance until they were defeated later on with a military crushing. And my most recent book is about what happened, which is few people know about it. The Italian colonial fascists interned in concentration camps over 100,000 people, and 60 to 70%, according to my new book, Genocide in Libya, Shar, the Hidden Colonial History, that I spent 10 years studying, explain the intensity and the brutality and the transformation of Libyan society. It really pains me now people just talk about as if really that heritage, that violent, complex history that find many Libyans together is completely erased, and that colonialism ended in 1951, which is really a laughable thing. So this society experience with colonialism was very, very, very deep, because it was genocidal and it was settler colonialism. Turkey involvement with the Libyan people had many aspects, and let's not shy away. Sometimes looked at it in a positive way, sometimes looked at it as in a critical way. And that's really shouldn't really blind us to see things in an open discussion. During the anti-colonial struggle, many Ottoman Turkish officers and soldiers fought with the Libyans, but also Libyans thought that the agreement left Libya alone to the Italians. And there is this mixed package, communal pan-Islamic solidarity, and there is also critical aspect of that. Today, Libya, let's also be honest, the Turkish policy in Libya, some they advocate it and they think it was positive, but also some other ones who think that it's controversial and they don't really agree with it. And that shouldn't really let us to know that this is really something unusual. These are policies. You agree in some, you agree on others. The key is Turkey and Tripoli Gharb, or Libya, modern Libya. The Libyan people and the Turkish people have long common ties, long heritage that they could build on. The idea to side with one region or another will be really against that heritage, against that long solidarity with both societies. The other point that also I think what I'm trying to say is, no, in civil wars, there's nobody innocent. One could disagree with General Haftar, but we have to ask the question, what if there is no General Haftar? Whether the situation in the Western Libya will be fine with the militias and with the mercenaries and with incredible corruption that exists there. I think his attack in Tripoli was a huge mistake. I think the idea that he wants to be another new leader, that's wishful thinking. He cannot have a military solution imposed on the Libyan people, nor the others can impose their will and hide behind international recognition and international sanctions for that. This is why I said there is no innocent in the Libyan civil war, and the solution also should embrace all Libyans, all their regions, all their political persuasions, and under the rule of law that guarantees citizenship and difference. The legitimacy of difference that's missing. Unfortunately, now what we are dealing with is not only the armed struggle and conflict, but the hated speech where you demonize and you make the other your enemy. And here I don't exclude anybody. I don't really believe in it, and I don't think that's really part of the Libyan traditions in struggling against colonialism and the building the independent state in the 1950s, 60s, and we could say even liberally to 70s, despite the hanging, repression, imprisonment, and other things that the military regime have committed after 1969. But also the regime, let's not get carried away, had a repressive record, but also got rid of military bases, which was a Libyan national issue. Here, the things get really blurred, and it really forces us to see, even under dictatorships or under rivals, how could we understand the other instead of say, we are really, I think the other is really so-and-so, and there is no way of talking with it.
Dr. Ali, before you leave, I would like to give your fellow panelists a chance to respond. So if you could tie up your comments, I would want.
Yes,
what I want to
say.
Before you take your exit, I would like them to say a few words if they have any. I want to give them.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say, we are at a point where we could listen that nobody can impose its will, one region or one group or one armed groups or one on the Libyan society itself. This is a diverse small society that need to recognize as a civil government that recognize all Libyans. One of the things we learned that nobody could defeat the other ones. We need to recognize that's also impossible. Even if you win a little bit, Haftar is misguided if he thinks that he could do that. But also other groups, they are misguided so they think they can impose their will because they have allies and they have guns and arms and money. The lesson is Libya is big enough and has the traditions and the history of coexistence and decentralization that allows all Libyans to live together under the rule of Allah and the Libya that encompasses everybody as it did before. Libya does not start from zero, as sometimes is being referred to, tribes and region and fragmentation and so. That's really, unfair to the Libyan people and their struggle. There are commonalities, there is heritage, and the lesson is to not to demonize the other and look at solution that's Libyan. The outside actors, the fact they met in Berlin and agreed that they are part of the problem, they are part of the problem, not the solution, is a step forward, because it's hypocritical to assume this is a Libyan crisis, made from within. It's very hypocritical. It makes no sense. And I would say the regional actor, not one group, or they all contributed to it. So there is a lesson to be learned moving forward where, you overcome this polarization and you move forward and empower the Libyan people. Final analysis, The key is to have Libyan people are the one who should decide what kind of constitution, what kind of government, what kind of alliances. That's really the key. Not another government, an Arab or Muslim or European or American decide for the Libyan people what to do. That's going back to the days of colonialism, and Libyans will refuse it in the long term.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmida. Before you leave, just 1 minute, I wanted to give Dr. Esam and Dr. Ahmed a chance to respond to anything you've said. If they don't have anything to say, then we will move on. Dr. Ahmed, Dr. Esam, do you have anything to say to Dr. Ahmida before he leaves?
Yes, if I may, because
sure.
I don't want to talk from his behind. You know, I don't. When I said tribalism, I don't glorify tribalism, but it is when the state collapse, the system hemorrhage and system collapse, and there's all kind of uncertainties. People refuse to tribalism, and similarly to regionalism, it is present, and it is. I mean, it's a normal part of it, but I'm also surprised a little bit on Dr. Ahmida's discourse on kind of legitimizing Haftar. Haftar is, he came to take over power, not only attack Tripoli. I mean, on what basis he controls Benghazi and other parts? By force, by weapons. So this is what I am criticizing. And I think if the Libyans, you know, with a democratically elected system, also starting from zero doesn't mean, you know, the Libyans have all kind of civilization or everything, but during the Gaddafi time, they did not build institutions. Like when I say it is easier to reform militarist institutions like military in Egypt, or which is accustomed to military intervention, the Libyans had the advantage to build from or rebuild. I mean, again, or refurbish in a way the system. So this is the point I want to make. I mean,
thank you very much, Dr.
Natural
Ahmed.
outcome of this.
I don't think, Dr. Ahmed, I am legitimizing Haftar. I try to see the condition that produced him, but I'm never legitimizing him. Just to be clear.
Thank you, Dr. Esam. Would you like to say? I know, Dr. Ahmida, you have to leave very quickly.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure with Dr. Ahmida. I mean, I have no comments. I've learned a lot from his comments, though. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm really sorry, colleagues. I wish I could stay long. Thank you again, all. It was a pleasure to be part of this conversation. As-salama.
Thank you. As-salama.
Now, the rest of the time is devoted to questions that were directed to Dr. Ahmed and Dr. Esam, respectively. I'll begin with Dr. Esam. First of all, Dr. Esam, do you think that the political resolution in Libya will end up with a military state under the eastern wing of Cyrenaica? Because if we look at the history of the military institution in Libya, it has been always in the hands of the eastern wing. So the fact that there is a military imbalance within Libya, is there a chance in the long run that the eastern wing may win out? Number two, another question is, how do we reconcile the fact that in American eyes and also European eyes, a democratic Libya eventually will mean an Islamist Libya or some form of Islamic government, therefore creating a tension between American and European desires to see democracy and also the will of the Libyan people. The question that I had posed at the end to Dr. Ahmida is also relevant to your talk, that the US and Europe don't see eye to eye on their policy with Libya. With Europe, you had mentioned, has a lot of differences within it. So what do you think is achieved on the US end by handing the Libyan file to the Europeans? Another question that was directed to you was, could you briefly explain some of the interests of the external actors, such as the major powers, U.S. and also some of the Muslim powers that have been involved in the conflict? And lastly, the same question that I had asked for Dr. Ahmida, what are some of the lessons learned after 10 years after the Libyan revolution? And Dr. Ahmed, if there's any point, because there's only 3 of us, if there's any point that you would like to jump in and comment, feel free as you wish.
Thank you, Uys. I'll try to be brief, being mindful of the time. I'm going to jump into question number 3, which speaks about the US and the Europeans first, because it's consistent with some of my conclusions. The fact is, strong US diplomacy is the way to align the European interest in Libya. And despite the conflicts between France and Italy mainly, and then you have Great Britain still has some interest in Libya, and Germany also, and then of recent the Eastern Mediterranean, bringing in the Greeks and in the picture. And again, I keep referring, Turkey I think has been a very good ally to Libya throughout, historically, as well as in the conflict in November of 2020. And so when I skip that part, I'm essentially recognizing that it really is continued partnership is needed in this matter. But the Europeans need the US to be able to align the NATO will, if you may, in the Libyan conflict. And without a strong US diplomacy, we find ourselves, dealing with their differences playing out in Libya. The other thing that we can talk about is really the fact that North Africa has always presented a region in which the US deferred to its European allies when it comes to alignment of the Western interests in the region. And so, they proved not to do well, and we need US diplomacy and the UN process for that matter. But let me take up the other questions in terms of the imbalance that you mentioned regarding the military. The fact is, Libya is way too militarized right now, and the weapons are awash in Libya, both in the east, west, and in the south for that matter. And so I think the fear for a military dominated by Barqa or Cyrenaica and the east, I don't think it's there. I think, in fact, even if you look at the so-called military that Haftar keeps speaking about, one of the fallacies is the name he uses, the Libyan National Army, was in fact a name of a militia he got commissioned under the Department of Defense in Libya early on in the revolution. And he just used that name strategically to give himself that notion that he is the commander of that army. And then even recently now he calls it the Libyan Arab armed forces, trying to give it that grandeur. And in fact, most of Libya's military, even commanders, are actually in the western area, and his militias, his military, so-called military, is a hodgepodge of militias for the most part. Some of them are very extreme, actually, militias and are extremists, and some of them are just militias that are covered by some soldiers that are now taking the shape of and if it wasn't for the outside support, it wouldn't have been. So I think the negative role that the renegade general has played, the military force that is seen as the spoiler of the Libyan conflict, is something that cannot be or can never be really the real nucleus for Libyan army. I think the 5+5 negotiations that have been ongoing, some of it has been about reestablishing the military forces, and it's equally represented from the regions, and hopefully will produce something that will not be dominated by any force. As far as the West worrying about the democratic Libya, sadly, I think the lessons of the Arab Spring has been that really the true democracy, or at least the ideals of democracy, have been championed by Islamists and by advocates of political Islam far more than by liberals and otherwise. And so it's a dilemma, unfortunately, that we have to grapple with the fact that if we really want true democracy, the champions are going to be those who are in peace and in reconciliation with their heritage and with their Islam, and who espouse, a wasati Islam, a moderate Islam that is not only one that preserves the ideals of justice and democracy, but one that is very much open to the different components and different ideologies and different groups in the region. And they are really, by being true to this cause, able to produce this. I think the challenge is going to be that we need to speak with in unison and with a loud voice. I think the Turkish alliance with the Libyan challenge has been powerful in producing the model, the successful model of that in Europe, despite the continued opposition to it. And I think it's going to be also part of changing the mind and ideas in the West by having the strategic reserve of the Arab and Muslim communities in the West, who are now becoming part and parcel of Europe and part and parcel of the US, to move towards the ability of being able to envision a new region and envision new partnerships, and having, you know, Turkey as a pillar of regional stability in the region, and not have a Israeli-centric policy towards the Middle East and North Africa. I mean, I think these are challenges, but they represent the very roots of why this remains a problem. I think we just need to push. I think Tunisia has provided a very flexible model where they were trying very hard to accommodate differences because of the eye being on the prize for the democracy and moving forward. Lastly, I can tell you, interest of external actors, I think, is a very big topic, and we can spend another hour and a half speaking about it. So I would want to defer on that and just say about lessons learned. And I think the one main lesson, which I believe Dr. Ahmida is also referring to, is we have to have a Libyan partner in all of this that is capable of speaking up about Libya's interest, and they need to be empowered. And that's why these regional and international alliances can only work in favor of Libya if they were with partners who see eye to eye with the democratic future of Libya. And I believe, if I was to reduce this, I think the US and Turkey are the most important two factors. The Turkey, because it provides regional stability, and because their interest in Libya is built on a true belief in helping Libyans achieve democracy and aligning regional forces that have been rampant, difficult to align, especially, let's say, with Egypt recently. I think that ability of Turkey to realign Turkey and bring it into the process has been very, very helpful, and Libyans should champion it. Internationally, Libya is best served by a strong alignment with the US, who's been really championing in the UN solution and is able to do two things: rein in the Europeans so that they can have a unified position. And of course, Libya is a neighbor to Europe and has to be, engaged with Europe, but more importantly, rein in the spoilers who have been really making it difficult for Libya to move on. And it is the counterweight to Russia as well as the regional spoilers. So I hope those can become the lessons for us to move forward in a way that will stabilize Libya and move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Esam. Dr. Ahmed, there were a number of questions directed towards your talk. Number one, do you think that the last European support, meaning France, Italy, and Germany, would cause a threat to the Turkish economic zone in the long term? Do you think that at the end, well, I think what the question is trying to say is that in the long run, do you think that Europe has interests that go against the Turkish claims in the Eastern Mediterranean? This is the questioner elaborates by saying, particularly because of the Eastern tension between Europeans and Turkey, and also the Turkish influence on Libya is restricted only to intelligence and military training. Even we have observed that the protests in Libya have always left a critical question about the fate of Turkey in Libya. So I guess he's asking about the relationship between the economic zone and the relationship between Turkey and Libya. That's number one. Another question is, what will happen to the Turkish-Libyan agreement after the last reconciliation effort? Will the defense cooperation alliance between the two states stand in the case of a new government? What is the legal basis of that? Also, there was a question regarding, could you elaborate on some of the historical relationship between Turkey and Libya before and after Gaddafi, and what role the current government wishes to achieve with Libya. The last question that I had is that you mentioned oil. Um, um, I wonder how much oil really has to do with the question of Libya, only because of the recent work of some of Professor Vitalis, who has questioned the idea that oil is the driving factor of policies in the Middle East. I mean, we saw that a violent project was maintained in Syria, and then also a violent project was maintained in Yemen. And Iraq, even though it has a lot of oil, instability has been a continuous situation there. So we don't really see a qualitative difference between civil wars and internal conflicts where there is oil and where there isn't oil. It seems like all of these drag on, regardless of the fact. I mean, if oil was a driving factor, then we would have seen stability come in Iraq and Libya much faster and much quicker than, say, for instance, places where those interests don't lie. I mean, that's one thesis. I don't know if that thesis is something that is something we can entertain. These are the questions for you, Dr. Ahmed. If you could give your opinions and your analysis.
Sure. Thank you, Uys. And as for the first question, I think EU has interest in security interest and also oil and gas energy interest in Libya. It was, I mean, the reconciliation, as I said, Turkey tried to use, if everybody was against the, democratic government and was pleased with Haftar, it would be more difficult. But because some of the countries are not happy that, especially Italy, you bring like 6 countries that are have interest, so it means it's reducing the Italy's share in Libya. America was not happy with Russian presence because they think of strategically and they don't just depend on France in the Africa's or even Europe's security, because they have also China is expanding in Africa. So plus, I mean, Russia is an ally to China, so they don't want to lose Africa probably. So this gives Libyans a chance to support this Libyan reconciliation, and plus they failed. Yeah, they failed to topple the government by themselves or with the Turkey's help. And this recent support, there is we don't worry about as long as Libyans decide, and for the future of Libya, they know they are tired of military regimes like Gaddafi or Haftar. Haftar even doesn't have a chance in the next elections because even east part of Libya are tired of him. And as long as European support for reconciliation and democratization, Turkey is not worried. Turkey is worried about if there is another third attempt by Haftar or somebody else, or somehow impose a just solution, and we can expect that also. Europe is democratic for themselves. For others, they don't really mean democracy. They say they want democracy, but they don't mean it. So this is my also Turkey is helping to rebuild the country, help to rebuild the institutions, military, bureaucracy, the services, municipal services, and other requirements or other needs of Libyans. So Turkey will have a place in Libya. I mean, also Libyans are more worried than Turkey because they are the ones that are attacked by these militias or Haftar. Also, militias are brought by the plotters of coup, and also even ISIS was a project or conspiracy that are brought to Libya to topple the democratic system, as it was done in Syria and Iraq. So, I mean, Haftar did not do anything to bring stability. I mean, east or the west. So as an criticism maybe to an earlier agreement about Haftar's role. Turkey's agreement also, Turkey had two agreements, one military cooperation and the other is cooperating naval agreement. So naval agreement divides the sea at the half and everybody gets a better chance, a lot better than Greece offers to Egypt or to Libya. So this benefits to both sides, but we know they are under pressure. Egypt is under pressure to accept a lesser share, plus also Libya is under pressure. But France tried to intimidate Turkey. When Turkey did not back down, then they realized, they have to deal with Turkey as a legitimate and as an equal partner, and they toned down their discourse lately. And other European countries and America, I think, also pressuring France that they have all bigger concerns, like in Russia, maybe a recent quick war can start being between Russia and Ukraine, and they have also worries in Nordic countries, etc. So they don't want to be dive into Libyan conflict as France wish, maybe. Also, the other one is the military. Turkey is training now, is giving a big support to make a joint security force, national security force. Some of the militias, not all of them are bad. Some of them are real revolutionaries that toppled the Gaddafi regime. Then they resisted the coup plotters, and they have a big role in Libya, and they are popular, and they are also they have tribal and local bases. So they should be, combined or integrated to the main system, and other reforms Turkey giving help. The third question, the historic relations before and Gaddafi. If you go back to the Ottoman time, we had a Turkish speaking community in Libya, a lot of mixed blood also. Misrata is known for its majority Turkish origin people, but we also had mixed Koroglu, the Janissaries that married to the local people in Tunisia, in Algeria, and Libya. This Koroglu or Kulolu or Karagile, the Arabs say, are present there, and they know they have good ties. And even Mustafa Kemal and others, they keep the contact with Libya. When Libya became independent, more or less, they also had a good relation. The King Senussi also brought a prime minister from Turkey. So because Libya was under colonization, was in very bad shape, so he bring him as a technocratic prime minister to develop his country. So the relations were more or less, in the positive side. Even Gaddafi did not destroy the relations. Gaddafi, he gave, for example, some contracts in the 80s when Turgut Özal tried to open to the Arab world. He rewarded this effort by giving contracts to Turkey. And today we talk about Turkish construction sector is strong, owes somehow to the Gaddafi projects, so contracts. So we know Libya has a good part in Turkey's development also. As I mentioned before, like Tunisia is significant for Tunisia and Turkey. Like with many investments and many contracts, after the fall of Gaddafi, they say about $30 billion still is many companies and contractors and others. They still they couldn't get his money. So the stabilization of Libya will also recover some of these debts. Maybe they have already. And oil and politics, I think I have a different insight. Traditionally, oil and Israel's security was critical in regions, MENA politics or Middle East politics. But today it is a little bit different because America found oil and gas. The US, one of the biggest consumer Now they turned out to be a producer. So I don't think they are worried about the conflicts in the region as much. They worry about Israel's security and kind of regional stability in their own way. I think when it doesn't serve, a stability doesn't serve, like Libya's democracy after the fall of Gaddafi did not serve Western interests, and they supported this chaos, or they at least turned a blind eye to the chaos in Libya, and they don't care as much. Europeans care about these fightings, but we realize that even Europeans don't care as much because now there are many different sources for oil and gas, and they can get from many places. And unless, it wasn't the case, the Europe would pay more attention to Libya very early, a long time ago, but they delayed, and they acted only when they realized Haftar failed to take over, and they acted. So I think oil and gas is lesser issue now, lesser strength for the Middle East than before, because all this chaos can interrupt. It is affecting the portion, but not the whole flow. Not like the 70s when the Arabs, they applied oil embargo and really hurt big powers like America and Europe. Today it is not the case, but still it's the energy and oil and gas are very critical in overall, but not as much as before.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. We have run out of time, and this concludes our discussion. It was a very lively and insightful discussion, and I am honored that all of you were able to participate and were able to join us. I would like to remind everybody that on Friday at 4 p.m. Istanbul Turkish Standard Time, we have a book discussion. We will be discussing Islam, Liberalism, and Ontology by Joseph Kaminsky. He is an international relations professor at the Department of at the University of Sarajevo. His book is quite celebrated these days. We'll be discussing that book. Also, coming up during Ramadan, we have a daily webinar. So it's a tradition at SIGA that during Ramadan that we spend a small bit of time thinking about the Muslim world and its place in international politics. So we have every day a different topic. That schedule will be coming out soon, and it will be every day at around 5:30 p.m. We will have an hour or so of discussion on different topics. So stay tuned for that. Once again, Dr. Ahmed, Dr. Esam, and Dr. Ali, who participated but left, I want to thank you all from SIGA. Good night, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. Thank you.